Listen, I'm not sure how I managed to read this many books in 1 month, but I read 14 books this month. You'll see a couple of these books are pretty hefty. They're pretty thick, so I'm surprised that I got through that many books this month. But we're gonna chat about all my feelings, all my thoughts, all of that about all the books I read in September. We're actually gonna start off with a book that I forgot that I read in August. So technically I read 13 books in the month of September, and one of these books I read in August. I just fully forgot that I read it in August and didn't include it in that video. So we're gonna talk about it here. This might surprise some of you. This is The Unmaking of June Farrow. I feel like this is a very popular, very loved book. That's why I feel like some of you might be surprised. But I did rate this a 3-star and I did listen to this. And I just feel like the fact that I fully forgot that I read this book in the month of August, I feel like that should tell you something, you know? Like, I fully forgot about this book, which is shocking because I didn't hate it. It is basically about this young woman who a bunch of things are kind of just off with her and her family. And she kind of says that all of the women in her family are doomed and that everyone like goes crazy. And I think my main problem with this, especially with the audiobook, was that they made everything sound very stereotypically Southern. I don't know if that makes sense, but I hate when books do that. Like, not everywhere in the South is as stereotypical as you think it is, which just turns me off to the book. Like, it's nothing really wrong. That just kind of turns me off to the book. It makes me have higher expectations because I need you to make me like it more if you're gonna do that. I don't know. That's just something weird that I do. I don't know. And it is one of those books that I don't feel like I would recommend listening to it. I feel like I would recommend reading it rather than listening to it because, like I said, I don't really love like Southern accents or anything like that when I'm listening to an audiobook, which is unfortunate because I actually did get this audiobook recommended to me, like specifically the audiobook. Let's move on to an audiobook that I actually did really enjoy. This is Talking as Fast as I Can from Gilmore Girls to Gilmore Girls by Lauren Graham. First off, so fitting that I listened to her memoir in the month of September, getting into the fall spirit in a unique way by listening to her memoir. But Lauren Graham is the actress who played Lorelai Gilmore on Gilmore Girls. If you are unfamiliar, Gilmore Girls is such a good show, such fall vibes. It's so good, so I highly recommend the show to anyone and everyone. But she basically just tells stories about her life and specifically how she gets into acting. She does talk a little bit about like her childhood, but I feel like most of what I remembered and most of the book as a whole talked about her experience acting, and it was so interesting to hear about. I love hearing about the behind the scenes of acting, which I feel like is why I am so into like celebrity acting memoirs. And she actually has 2 memoirs, so I listened to that one and then I also listened to her second one, which is Have I Told You This Already? Stories I Don't Want to Forget to Remember. This one was more of just short stories about her life, a little bit less of a focus on acting, but obviously that's her life, so that was still in there. I also discovered that she has another book that she wrote herself. It's like a fiction novel that I kind of want to read, but I feel like I liked this memoir a little bit less than her first one, mostly because I really liked the acting focus that was in the first one, but I still very much enjoyed listening to her life, and she narrates both of these audiobooks. So if you love Gilmore Girls as much as I do, definitely recommend listening to those. It was so cool to just hear her voice. And then I moved on to finishing the And then I moved on to finishing the Throne of Glass series. I actually did this in a vlog on my channel, so if you want super in-depth thoughts and feelings, I will link that. But it is full of spoilers, so I will give my spoiler-free review here. Before I talk about each individual book, because I read the last 3 this month, I want to talk about what the series is even about, in case you don't know. But I'll tell you what the first book is about, because I obviously don't want to spoil anything. So in the first book, Selena is in a, what is it called? She's in like a prison camp, but she gets taken out of this prison camp to join a trial to become the king's champion. And obviously you follow her through her trials and all the crazy things that they make her do, and you really just get to know her and follow her throughout the whole series and her crazy adventures and everything that goes on. But like I said, I read the last 3 books in the series, which is Tower of Dawn, Empire of Storms, and Kingdom of Ash. And I do kind of want to talk about Tower of Dawn and Empire of Storms at the same time because I read them at the same time. I did the tandem read because these 2 books take place at the same time, so I just felt like that would make the most sense to my brain, which it did. I loved doing the tandem read. But I will say, I think I like Tower of Dawn a little bit more than I liked Empire of Storms. I don't know why. There's just something in the first half of Empire of Storms that I didn't love. It didn't sit right with me. It took me so long to get into this book, but the last half of this book was so good. Blew me away. This book is a lot less fast-paced, which I feel like most people don't like that about this book specifically. That's why most people like Empire of Storms rather than Tower of Dawn. But I'm gonna rate them together because I read them at the same time. So I just feel like they need to have the same rating. So obviously my experience would be different if I didn't read them at the same time. So I'm gonna rate both of these a 4-star. Very much enjoyed these and highly recommend doing the tandem read. I loved it so much. And now this is where things turned a little bit south for me. I will say I had the highest hopes for Kingdom of Ash, but this book fell so flat for me. It did not need to be almost 1,000 pages long, not even close did it no. It could have been 600, maybe even 700 pages, and it still would have been a good book. It would have been a better book. It would have been so much better if you ask me. The pacing was just weird. There were so many, I can't tell you that, actually that's a spoiler, but something happens a lot in this book and I was just like, oh my gosh, like, give it up. I did rate this a 3-star, mostly because of the pacing. There's a couple romantic scenes in here that I just didn't like, didn't sit right with me. And that just really sucks because I feel like this happened with Throne of Glass and ACOTAR, where the last book in the series was my least favorite and it just leaves a sour taste in my mouth. Like, I kind of feel like I'm looking back at both ACOTAR and Throne of Glass and I'm thinking poorly of them because they ended on such a bad note. So I'm very disappointed, and I feel like it only got a 3-star in my brain because I was already attached to the characters at this point. But I will say some of these characters, I didn't even like them. Like, even in the beginning, that was all my thoughts about that. I am very disappointed. I didn't love it because everyone else seems to love it, and I definitely had the highest expectations going into Kingdom of Ash. And then I actually read The Divine Comedy by Dante. This is a classic, so it's definitely not for everyone. I read this again in a reading vlog, and I don't think I'm gonna rate this book because, I don't know, I just don't think it's for me to rate because the way that this book is, you have to literally like sit and pick it apart to get the full effect of this book. At least in my opinion, I feel like you have to do that. And I'm not someone that loves to sit and pick apart their books. I also talked about in that vlog how this book felt oddly real, which let me tell you what this book is about and then maybe like you'll understand why it feels oddly real to me. But basically this is about someone going through like the 3 stages of the afterlife. So you start with Inferno, which is hell, and there's like different circles of hell that he goes through, and then you go through Purgatory, I believe is the next one. Yes. And you go through Purgatory and then you go through Paradise. And like I said, there's just a lot of symbolism in here. If you like classics and you like to pick things apart, then I highly recommend this. This is definitely for you if you like that. If not, I would say definitely pass on it. And then I read through a couple books on my fall TBR, which slay. I actually listened to You Again, which I was pleasantly surprised by how much I enjoyed this audiobook. I will say though, this is another book that's definitely not for everyone. I almost stopped reading this book in the very beginning because the female main character she's a little bit odd. She takes some getting used to, at least in my opinion, because she is very, like I said, odd. She's just different than any female main character that I've ever experienced. Took some getting used to, so I'm glad that I didn't DNF this, especially because I ended up rating this a 4-star. The only thing holding it back was, like I said, the female main character was just very different and it took me some getting used to. But I feel like if she wasn't like that, this easily would have been a 5-star because I would have just immediately jumped in and absolutely loved this book. It's somewhat second chance. It is very fall-esque, set in New York City, but also anything that's set in New York City will give me fall vibes, so that might be why I think that this is fall vibes, along with the cover. They do have some moments where they're like talking about Christmas and I'm like, oh, maybe you could read this during Christmas time maybe. Follow the main character. I of course forgot her name, but she is a comedian, or she does like something in the comedy space, which I feel like kind of just goes hand in hand with her quirky personality. I also loved the male main character and just the two of them. I loved them together, but like I said, it did take some getting used to. So if you're thinking about reading this book or you've recently DNF'd this book, give it a little bit more of a chance. It ended up being so good though, and I really liked the audiobook. I am kind of picky about my audiobooks. That's why typically I just go for a memoir because I like listening to like the author's voice, because normally memoirs are narrated by whoever wrote it. But I did really enjoy this audiobook, so if you're looking for a new audiobook, I recommend this one. Then I read The Curious Incident of the Dog in the Nighttime. This is such a long title that every time I try to say it, I get it wrong. I rated this a 3.5. I did really enjoy it, but it kind of fell off for me in the last half of the book. I just kind of stopped caring, to be honest, because the book takes such a turn in the last half of the book. But in the beginning, you are following this young boy who finds a dog murdered, and he's like, I'm gonna solve the case of this murdered dog. But it is so very unique because the main character has autism and he is the narrator of the book. So you are inside of his brain the entire time. And honestly, in the first half of the book, I was obsessed with it. I thought that it was going to be a 5-star read for me. Like I said, there was just something in the last half of the book that really lost me. Like, it wasn't bad by any means. Obviously, 3.5 is still a good rating. But like I said, something in the last half of the book, I just kind of lost interest in it. And then I read Coraline, which this is YA horror, which, hey, Did not know that that was a genre before reading this book. I will say though, this book kind of felt like a reread for me because I've watched the movie so many times as a kid. Like as a kid, I weirdly loved this movie, which I actually really want to go back and rewatch the movie like now that I'm a lot older and see if I still like the movie. But as a kid, I loved this movie. So it was a very nostalgic read for me. I rated this a 4-star. But honestly, I feel like if I read this book when I was younger before watching the movie, I would have loved this book. I feel like I would have loved this book, but it was also kind of uncharacteristic for me to have loved this movie so much because I don't like creepy movies, scary things at all. So definitely shocked that I liked this as a kid. But if you don't know anything about Coraline, basically it's about this young girl who lives with her parents in England in an apartment, and she discovers this door in her house that opens up to a brick wall. Like the door doesn't open into anything until one day it does, and she discovers this whole other world behind this door. And I feel like it is perfect for this time, perfect for October, perfect for spooky season, especially if you're someone like me and you don't like scary books at all. This was the perfect amount of spooky for me. It didn't keep me up at night, but I was still a little scared. And then I read The Full Moon Coffee Shop, which honestly, I forgot that I read this book until today when I was looking over all the books I read this month. But I still really enjoyed this book. I would rate it, I think, a 3.5, maybe a 3, simply because, like I said, I forgot that I read this book. It's a perfect quick little read. It's actually split up into 3 sections, so it was perfect for me because I would lay down at night before going to bed and I would just read a section, go to sleep, next night read a section, go to sleep, next night finished it, slept. So it was perfect for that. And I honestly can't even lie, I picked this up because there are cats involved in the book and cats on the cover of the book, and I definitely don't regret it. The cat aspect in this book was so cute. I loved that. As a cat lover, anytime a book incorporates a cat, I'm gonna want to pick it up and I'm gonna read it and I'm gonna enjoy it, most likely. But basically this is about a coffee shop that you can only see and only go to if a cat brings it to you. And the cats in this book are like magical cats, like they kind of help guide you along in your future, and you can only really go to this coffee shop or get invited by a cat if you're in a phase of your life where you're kind of lost. And I will say there is a lot of astrological type of things in this book, and that's not really something that I'm into, so that was a big part of the book that really fell flat for me. But if you like cats and you like astrology, I think that this would be a really good book for you. And then I read Another Love Story by Ashley Poston. I feel like this book has gotten so many mixed reviews on the internet, but I'm here to say that I loved it so much. I think that this is a 4.5 star for me, which sounds annoying because it's like, why not just round up to 5? I just didn't give me that 5-star feeling, but I still really liked this book. Basically you follow our main character who one day is randomly transported into her favorite fictional world. It's basically a romance with a hint of magical realism in it, which is my favorite thing about Ashley Poston's books. All of her books have this type of magical romance, magical realism, and romance, which is just my favorite thing. And honestly, I'm not exactly sure what is holding back this book from being a 5-star for me, other than the fact that it just didn't give me that feeling. But I will say, if I had gone into this book with such high expectations and comparing it to The 7-Year Slip, which is my all-time favorite book by this author and maybe ever in the whole entire world, I love that book so much. If I had gone in comparing that book to this one, I definitely would not have liked this book as much as I did. So that's just a thought, just putting that out there in case you loved 7-Year Slip as much as I did and want to read this one. Just try not to compare the two because they are very different. And then I read The Devil Wears Prada, which shocked me very much on how much I liked this book. I rated this a 4-star, and I've said this before that this book, I wasn't even obsessed with it that much. I didn't love it that much. For the entire time that I was reading it, I was like, okay, like 3.5, maybe 3-star, I'm not really sure. I ended up giving this a 4-star because I still think about this book to this day. Finished this like a week or 2 ago. I still think about it. Like, I really liked this book a shocking amount. But I will say, if you've seen the movie and you haven't read the book, they are two very different things. Like, very different. I read the book and immediately watched the movie because, like I said, I couldn't stop thinking about it. The movie is so different than the book, so if you are thinking about reading the book but you're like, oh well, I already know the story, so watch the movie, don't let that stop you. It is very different. But if you don't know what this book is about, it is about this girl fresh out of college who gets a job as an assistant to the editor of this giant fashion runway. Whoa, I cannot speak right now. She gets a job as an assistant working for the editor of this giant fashion magazine, even though fashion is not really something that she's into at all. And you basically just follow her life as she is the assistant to this crazy editor who has crazy demands, and just her life kind of flips upside down while working for this woman. It did kind of feel repetitive at times just because of the crazy things that her boss would make her do, but I still very much enjoyed it, obviously, because it's a 4-star. And then for the last book of the month, I read Ruthless Vows. I actually finished this morning, so I haven't had a lot of time to think about this book, but I think I'm gonna give it a 3.5 star, mostly because I am just so confused. Like, I'm not gonna tell you exactly what this book is about because it's the second book in a series, or second book in a duology, so it's the last book. The first book is Divine Rivals, and you basically follow these two people who can talk on a magical typewriter and they fall in love and it's all cute. It's a romantasy, and I heard so many people say that this book really fell flat for them because they didn't get that romance aspect, and I just want to say, did we read the same book? Not to be dramatic, but I was so upset because I had hyped myself up so much to go into this book and not get a ton of romance. I was like, Morgan, just remember, like, you're gonna get a lot of fantasy aspect in this book, not a lot of the romance that you got in the first book. So I was hyping myself up, and when I picked up this book, I was in the mood for fantasy. No, I was not in the mood for romance because everyone said that this was giving very much mostly fantasy vibes, not a lot of romance. And that's when I repeat myself, did we read the same book? Because in my opinion, this had so much romance in it. And I wish I had read this before all the hype came out and like all the reviews came out, because I thought that going into this thinking that it would be solely fantasy, not a lot of romance in it, I thought that that would help. It didn't. It actually hurt me because there was a lot of romance in this, and I don't know, I'm kind of stuck between a 3.5 and a 4, so editing me will put it on the screen to let you know. But I was a little bit disappointed because, like I said, I thought that it would be mostly fantasy, but it was not. It was a good mix of romance, if you ask me. And that is every single book I read in the month of September. I am gonna do a very quick October TBR in this video because I'm not gonna do my TBR jar picking my reads this month, mostly because I fully failed at doing that in the month of September. I read like none of the books from my TBR. But here's some books that I definitely want to read in the month of October. So first one I actually just started. This is Lady Clementine. I also really want to work through some of my series this month that I've started. So The Devil Wears Prada, I obviously just started that. It's a trilogy. Cinder series, I want to read a couple more of those as well. I think those are like the main two. Oh, maybe Magnolia Parks actually. I need to get through that series as well. But I for sure want to read The Nightingale, The Perfect Place to Die, Asylum, which would actually be a reread for me, but I'm on the fence about reading it because it's a whole series and I don't know if I want to get into the whole series right now, which this is the only book in the series that I read, but also at the same time this is just perfect for October, so maybe. And Home Before Dark by Riley Sager. So that was my quick little mini October TBR because I really want to just let myself mood read for October since I have seemed to really been bad about following a TBR, so that's my little mini TBR. I hope you all enjoyed this video. Don't forget to comment, like, and subscribe, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!